Welcome back to the OPSEC Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you integrate OPSEC as a discipline and strengthening your privacy posture. I am your host, Alan Pace, and today we dive into one of the most powerful tools for preserving privacy and personal security, which is alias management. We're going to explore how to create and use aliases, as well as the overarching use case for aliases in privacy and OPSEC lifestyles, as well as potential legal implications of using aliases online. Let's start with, what is an alias? An alias is a fictional identity that you use online when signing up for various services or products that do not require your real identity. A strong alias would include a name, an email address, a phone number, a physical address, and a birth date, and possibly a profile picture, preferably created through a realistic image from AI generation that does not resemble or connect back to your real identity in any way. Now, it's important to talk about what an alias is not. An alias is not for committing fraud, breaking any laws, stalking or harassing anybody online or in the real world. It's not used for any activity that is illegal or immoral, and it is not used anywhere where your real identity is required by law, such as with government agencies or banks that require the KYC or the Know Your Customer laws. Now, for some of you, the use of an alias is going to sound a little strange or perhaps over the top. But the use of an alias has many benefits. That can include email spam reduction, data broker separation or reputation protection, the avoidance of being doxxed, general privacy reasons because it just separates your activities online from your real identity. And if you're a frequent on the privacy forums online, for example, the Our Privacy forum on Reddit, you'll know that many users prefer alias-based signups and separate identities to prevent linking across different platforms. For OPSEC best practices of managing aliases, it's recommended to use a profile management technique such as a profile management template of some sort. This can be a spreadsheet that you create on your computer and store your alias information on the spreadsheet. It can be through the use of the identities section of your password manager. For example, Bitwarden has a section where you can manage different identities. Or you can use persona creation apps, which we'll get into more here in a few minutes. One of them that most people are familiar with is MySudo. I have a lot of use of that app, and it has been very successful for me. Next, you want to practice isolation with your different aliases. You want to use separate browser profiles or containers, for example, Firefox multi-account containers. And every single time you log in to a specific alias, you do it in the same container. You don't cross-pollinate aliases into each other's containers. Additionally, using unique credentials is critical. Do not reuse passwords or recover emails across aliases and real accounts. This is particularly important when data breaches happen. One example would be a data breach happens and you have an extremely unique password you use them across different aliases and the passwords are leaked, hackers can link those accounts together because of the uniqueness of your password. Next, you will want to take measures to hide your IP address using a VPN or Tor, and do not log on to the same VPN connection with different personas. Have every single persona use a unique VPN connection or unique location of the VPN server that you log into for that account. What I like to do is if I create a persona that is based out of Denver, Colorado, then I set up a profile to where every time I log in to that alias or using that alias's credentials, I make sure that my VPN connection is logged into the home location that I stated for that persona. And finally, use separation with two-factor authentication methods. Now, what this means is if you're using two-factor via text or SMS, which is not recommended, but if you're using it because that's all the service offers, you don't want to cross phone numbers over different alias accounts. It's also best to have a unique authenticator app or a unique authenticator profile for the individual aliases. That function can also be performed inside of a tool like Bitwarden. Next, you can use alias creation tools such as MySudo or IronVest. Now, I have a lot of positive experience with MySudo. MySudo is a full alias or persona suite with separate phone numbers, email addresses, and if you're an Apple user, an iPhone user, they also have virtual payment cards that they offer for each persona as well. IronVest is more of a browser extension-based tool. It has the ability to provide mask emails, phone numbers, as well as payment cards on the desktop or laptop setups. Now I'm going to provide some examples of how you would use personas, and I want to highlight the fact that this is examples of personas that are not used under your real name. I'm going to be doing a different episode where I dive into my strategy of how I layer my personal accounts with different email addresses and phone numbers for different use cases that are under my name. That's not what we're talking about today, however. Today we're talking about products and services that do not require your real identity or any of your personal information in order for you to complete a purchase or for them to provide you with that product. One primary example would be the use of newsletters or promotions that you're signing up for because you are requesting more information from a company. You would use this persona for signing up to deals, newsletters, offers. You would provide them a virtual email. You would provide them the created name and potentially a mass credit card if required to purchase that product. And every time that you want to seek out a similar product, you would use that same persona. And that way, all of that information comes to that one email address. And you will find that you will start getting lots of promotion or spam emails or advertising emails to that individual email account because of the nature of the way you use it. And the benefit is that does not come to your real name and it doesn't come to your real email account. So you can disregard nearly all of those emails. And it doesn't clutter up your personal email account or any of your other email accounts that you might use that have some level of importance to them. Now, another alias use case that touches on a previous episode we did on the podcast, which is fitness or health trackers. you would create a separate name, separate email, again, a separate payment card, and you would use it for services like Strava or Garmin Connect if you have a Garmin Sport watch, or whatever falls under that category. An Oura Ring is another example. Some of these accounts require, or some of these services rather, require a Gmail or an Apple account. I've gone and created Gmail accounts for personas that require those, that are required by those services, as well as using a MySudo email or a masked email through ProtonMail. And then I use only the Gmail account in order to log in to their service if it's required. The major benefit of this is that if those companies have a data breach and they leak your personal data, it has a lot of health information attached to it, and that information will not be attached to your name. As well as the example that we used during the episode where we talked about Strava, where they released the location data to millions of their users, and it showed where their users ran on a heat map. You pair that with account information, and if you're using an alias or an online persona, that does not come back to you as an individual. That also provides a layer of physical security from preventing people from finding out and matching your name to your home location. Now, a third use case that we'll cover today will be forums or social media accounts. This one can get a little bit more difficult because lots of social media platforms require an actual SIM card linked telephone number. They don't accept VoIP phone numbers, which most of these masked numbers for MySudo and most of these services provide are VoIP phone numbers. There is different ways to get around that. For example, if you're in the US, you can go buy a temporary SIM card in cash and activate it for 2 weeks of free use or whatever. And you can sign up to all your accounts that way. I don't particularly like to do that, but sometimes it's necessary. For the forum and social media accounts, I try to regulate those a lot more strict than the other ones because you're typically using those and interacting with people. And if other people get upset with things that you're saying or whatever the case might be, they might start looking into you. So I manage those a little bit more carefully with more believable names, addresses, locations, birth dates, and such in order to try to maximize separation from my true identity. All right. Well, you've officially listened to me drone on about the details of aliases for about 12 or 13 minutes at this point. Let's talk about the why. There's a lot of chatter that you'll hear people talk about aliases being unethical or against the user agreement of certain products or services, and that we should not use them for those reasons. However, I do not agree with that. The companies that create these products create them to monetize your data, and that is the default standard in this industry. And I don't remember ever agreeing to that. And I'm sure you don't either. So they've made up their own rules that 99% of people would disagree with on a fundamental level. Therefore, I am under the belief that I get to make up my own rules. Now, using aliases, again, like I said at the beginning, is not to commit fraud in any way. I don't use aliases to do anything that is nefarious. I always pay for the services legitimately that I use. I use them appropriately as well and in an honest way. I just don't do it under my real identity because unless there's a legal requirement, they do not need that information. And companies have established a default expectation of volunteering all of your personal information to them to provide a service, which is almost never required unless they're sending you something or if it's related to money. So in a world where privacy matters, and that is what matters in my world, and probably a lot of the listeners of this podcast as well, I create my own rules that are focused on protecting my privacy and not focused on providing my personal information and my data for free. Many of these services require you to submit a significant amount of data, and I use false data for that reason. Now, some of the fun things I like to do when creating aliases is use, funny names or public addresses to government buildings or public holidays for birthdays and such. It's a thing that you can get real creative with. I'm not going to give away all of my methods, but I will let you know that the AI has been a pretty big game changer in the creation of real back profiles or real sounding profiles for alias management and creation. Now, preferably, you would have them segmented out in 3 or 4 categories in your life, and those categories can be different for everybody. But for me, I like to use them for online purchases for services that do not require shipping any product to me or knowing my real identity. 2, I like to have a junk or a spam related alias that I can just put anywhere and not care if I'm trying to just get a newsletter, for example. And me personally, I don't use social media, but I do have fitness trackers that I like to use. I really enjoy the biohacking part of data collection for my fitness routine and my sleeping patterns and whatnot. So I have a persona for all of those as well. And those are the 3 things that I covered in today's definitions. And those are the 3 that I recommend for pretty much everybody. Now you can take that steps further and you can go as far as you want, as deep as you want into this rabbit hole. But keeping it simple, I think 3 to 4 online aliases is more than enough, and that will also prevent confusion when you're applying them and using them. Another huge benefit to online aliases is the inevitable data breach. Whenever an account gets breached or a website gets breached, they don't get your personal information, they get your alias. And that's a signal to retire that alias, roll back your subscriptions or whatever is attached to it, and create a new one. It gives you an opportunity to refresh the whole process, learn new tools, and start over. It can be a mild inconvenience, but it's also a learning opportunity to get some fresh alias building skills under your belt. When you are creating aliases and deciding on what information to use, try to use information that's very common. A quick Google search on common birthdays will show you that September 9th is one of the most common birthdays. Use that. You get lost in a crowd that way. Google search most common names based on the location or country that you're in, and put together an extremely common name, but not too common. You don't want John Smith, for example. But make it believable. And then you can hide within the crowd and not be too obvious. And you will find that you run into some roadblocks. Some of these Companies, like I mentioned before, they don't like VoIP phone numbers. And for those of you who are unaware, VoIP means voice over IP. It's a virtual phone number that's not attached to a SIM card in a phone. Most of the services take it, but some don't, especially the more high-profile social media companies. So you have to get creative. Like I mentioned before, temporary SIMs, those work well. Also, virtual cards can become an issue over time, depending on the vendor that you're purchasing the product from. You might have to go and get a prepaid card from a local store or use crypto. But the ongoing point that I'm trying to get across is that we have to take this opportunity to take back our freedom of maintaining our own data and our own identities. None of us subscribed to this system that has been put in front of us where we have to default give all of our data over to these companies. So go against the grain, make your own rules. Their rules are not really relevant. And if they are, then guess what? Your account gets shut off for violating the use agreement and you get to start over. But I would rather do that 100 times than just volunteer my own personal information and increase the potential of it getting leaked onto a dark web forum in a data breach. Most people don't like the thought of having to go through all this extra effort. It's an inconvenience. We've been trained to value convenience over privacy, and I reject that. And I hope that you can start thinking in a manner of rejecting that as well. Convenience is almost exclusively a security violation or a trick for you to give all of your information over to these companies. This thought process and this discipline of privacy and OPSEC provides you with the opportunity to deal with less comfort and less convenience. And over time, I have found that it becomes fun and interesting and challenging to try to get around these different roadblocks that are thrown in front of us and these different fake rules that are applied by these companies in order for me to be able to use their products and their services legitimately, but without exposing myself. So I want you to start thinking in the manner of, no, I do not accept this. And start using that as motivation to crafting your own discipline of privacy and OPSEC around the digital footprint that is your life. And then you can start taking that outside of the digital into the physical world, which we will cover in future episodes, and different strategies related to physical security or situational awareness or physical fitness or whatever. But the foundation is OPSEC and privacy in the digital world, because it's the one that everybody uses every single day, because everybody uses their phone 24/7. So, having said that, that is all for today's episode of the OPSEC Podcast. We covered the concept, creation, and application of aliases and online personas. And I hope you found value in today's episode, the information that we covered. And remember, your privacy and your security is your responsibility. Your vulnerabilities and your weaknesses, that's on you too. Until next time, I'm your host, Alan Pace, signing off.